Hey guys, this is part 3 in my 286 restoration series. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, you really should check those out. There's some good material there. So in today's video, I'm going to install Microsoft DOS 5.0, and we'll go over some of the applications that you might have had on your computer back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I have a 32 meg compact flash card. That's already in the system. But before we can use it, we need to do a little bit of work. On a newer system, there's typically an option to auto-detect a brand new hard drive, but this is a 286, and even with the Quad-Tel BIOS, unfortunately there is no option in here to automatically pick up the cylinder, head, and sector information. But there is another way we can do that. I'm going to boot from a DOS disk, and I'll run a utility called IDE info. Now, as you can see, IDE info prints the cylinder, head, and sector information. Now we've got 490 cylinders, 4 heads, and 32 sectors per track. So let's reboot again. We'll go back into BIOS and enter those details. And now that we have our hard drive installed, let's boot back into DOS. So I'm not going to go through the installation just yet. First, I want to make sure that that drive is completely blank. Now this is a used compact flash card, and I found some interesting things on used drives before. So I'm going to go into fdisk. We'll completely delete that partition and create a new one. Okay, so the old partition is deleted. Let's create a new one. And then we'll reboot. Now we need to format that drive. And of course that goes very quickly with a compact flash card. And I'm just going to fast forward through the installation of DOS. Now we've got a full installation of DOS 5.0. and it loads into the DOS shell. I really don't want DOS shell on here. I'm going to back out of this, and we'll comment that out in the autoexec bat so it doesn't load on boot. Now that we've got a fully functional operating system on the computer, let's take a look at some common applications that you might have had back in the day. Now, DOS 5 introduced a lot of really useful features, but there were still a few things that were conspicuously missing from DOS at this point. Among them was a defrag utility. Now, what defrag does is simply reorganize all of the information on the drive to speed up access of the files. So we'll run through a quick defrag. There's also a few options here to try and recover data from damaged floppy disks. I'm going to try the revival option, see what it can do for this floppy. I know there's some bad sectors on this one, so no, really, we've got nothing to lose. Now, I don't think the revival actually fixed any of those bad sectors. They're physically damaged at this point, so nothing is going to save those. If you had an important file on a floppy disk and you absolutely had to try and recover that information, Norton Utilities might have saved your bacon back in the day. Viruses were pretty common back in the DOS days, so you absolutely needed some form of antivirus. I always used fprot antivirus. This version is slightly newer than I would have liked, but it'll work just fine. So we've got no infections on that hard drive. Makes sense, this is a brand new install. But where's the fun of testing an antivirus program if we don't have any sort of infection? I've got a floppy disk here. It's write protected. There's 4 viruses on that floppy disk. I don't want to lose these, so I write protected the disk. But it's good to see that fprot is capable of detecting all 4. If not directly identifying them. You notice that john.exe was identified as possibly a new variant of an existing virus, but fprot didn't know for sure. If you did any sort of programming back in the late 80s or early 90s, there's a really good chance you encountered the BASIC programming language. What I've got here is a program that prints the numbers 1 through 256 on the screen, but more importantly, it also sends that information to the parallel port, that is the printer port. You can see that board attached to the monitor. That actually shows the status of each of the data lines on that printer port. Now this is more than just a light show. This is how you would control external devices connected to the computer. And nowadays we would use an Arduino. Now I'd like to come back to this concept in another video. Maybe in BASIC, maybe in assembler. We'll see. Either way, there's no doubt BASIC was the programming language of the 80s. And last but not least, we need some sort of word processing software. Now, WordPerfect 5.1 was very common. Personally, I have to be honest, I was never really a fan of this program. It's not terribly user-friendly, and even experienced users of WordPerfect would generally have the keyboard shortcuts taped to their keyboard. When you first load the program, you simply have this blank blue screen with a tiny little bit of information down at the bottom. If you wanted to print bold text, I believe it was Control-B to start bold, and Control-B once again to end the bold text. There was another shortcut for underline. After this video, I'm probably going to uninstall WordPerfect, but really, it would have been conspicuously absent if I'd left it out. So this was just a quick overview of getting the operating system installed, and a couple of the applications that you might have seen back in the late 80s, early 90s. Part 4 in this series is going to focus more on gaming. Now there's some games I'm going to install, and we'll have a little bit of fun. So, if you enjoyed this one, please feel free to like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below. If you were using a computer back in the 80s or 90s, what were your favorite programs? For that matter, what were your least favorite programs? And, as always, thanks for watching.